What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel for Webflow professionals. The goal of this channel is to give Webflow developers a competitive edge over other developers. So we'll cover things like interactions found on award-winning sites, many of which there aren't even tutorials for in the mainstream dev community. Thank you so much to those of you who put your tutorial suggestions in the comments below. We actually have a pretty big backlog now of tutorial ideas, so it'll take us a while to go through them, but if you can think of an interaction that can't be done natively in Webflow, put it in the comments. I read over every one of the comments and would love to consider it for a future video. So the idea for this video actually comes from Mel, and Mel asked, how do I use custom code in a clean and neat way in my Webflow projects? Is there any rules about hierarchy or how to organize things? So we're going to go ahead and cover that. In this video, we're going to cover 3 tips to best use code in your Webflow projects. Now, before we dive into that, I would like to talk about why do we even want to use code, because really the advantage of Webflow is that it's a no-code platform. You can build at the speed of thought. You can build super fast, a lot faster than if you were just coding this from scratch. So the reason why we would still want to use code is Webflow doesn't give you access to everything code can do. It gives you access to a lot, but it's not everything. So that can become a weakness of Webflow. You can end up hitting some walls where your design could be so much better if you just had a little bit of code that could do what you need it to do. So you don't have to understand everything about how to write code, but once you have an understanding of the basics, you can start looking things up. You can start implementing some of this a little bit easier in your own projects. So let's go ahead and dive into tip number 1. And tip number 1 is this: understand code types. And what I mean by that is we're going to cover 3 basic types of code. There's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I'll breeze through this part because this part is pretty well known. But basically HTML is any element that's on our page. Headings, links, videos, images, anything like that. HTML in a general sense is what it is. What is this element? Now CSS is how it looks. So we can style it. We can change the color, we can change the font size, we can change the space around it, padding, margin. There's a lot that we can change about how it looks, but CSS is generally that. And when we're using the style tab in Webflow, we're affecting the CSS or how it looks. Now when we come over to the interaction tab, that's when we're writing JavaScript. This is how it works. So on this heading, I can say on click, tap, or hover. I can queue up an interaction, and that interaction can do anything. Like maybe I take this heading and I change its text color to maybe a different color. So with this JavaScript, what I'm doing right now is actually affecting how it looks. So there's a little bit of overlap. That's why these aren't hard cut and dry rules, but generally JavaScript is how it works. And even with CSS, you can have CSS animations, you can have your own CSS hover state that's changing how it works. But again, generally CSS is affecting how it looks, JavaScript is affecting how the element works. Now when we're writing code, we usually don't have to write our own HTML. We can usually drag that in from the designer into our Webflow projects. There's very few instances where you'll have to do that. Usually what you're going to have to do is write your own CSS and JavaScript for some things, because Webflow doesn't give you access to everything that CSS or JavaScript can do. So if we go over to our page settings, anytime we're going to write CSS, we had to open it like this. I had to do an open and close style tag that looked just like that. Now anything inside that style tag, those 2 style tags, is where we can paste our CSS. If we didn't have those tags, it wouldn't work. So that we need those tags. And the same thing for JavaScript. We write it the exact same way, except we replace the word style with the word script. And then anything in between that open and closing script tag is where we can paste in our JavaScript. So let's give some examples of how to use this. Let's say we wanted a text outline around this heading. Webflow doesn't currently give us an option for like an outline. So I'm going to go ahead and paste the link in the description of this video to this. This is my collection of my most commonly used code on all my sites. So you can use this and you can search for what you want. Like if we were to search for stroke, this one comes up. I can see it's in a style tag, which means this is CSS. Or I can just see this tag right here that says CSS. I can go ahead and copy that CSS in between the style tag, go back over to my Webflow project, and then right here in between the style tag, I can paste my CSS. Now it's not actually going to do anything because we added a stroke, but we haven't told it what to apply it to yet. So we need the class of our heading. Now when you're naming classes, I typically recommend using all lowercase, no capitals, and no spaces. If you do use a space, Webflow is just going to convert it to a dash anyway on the live site. So you might as well just use a dash to begin with instead of a space. Makes it a little bit easier to stay organized. So I can copy this class name of fade up. I can go over to my code, and then Webflow hides the period for us, but all class names start with a period. So when we're writing our own CSS, we have to have that period before our class name. And then we can paste that in, and then we can maybe set some sizes. So if you look up Google CSS text strokes, you'll get like a lot of different options of how to use it, but it'll tell you like this first value is how wide it is. So if it's 2 pixels or however wide, and then the next one is the color. So if we want it to be white, we'll put it there. And if we hit save, nothing actually happens yet. Anything that's in this custom code here in the page settings, we have to publish to be able to see our change before it's live on the site. So now if I come over here and publish, that text stroke is there. It's working just as I would expect. Now let's say I also want to animate this. Maybe I want each letter to fade in one after the other. I did a tutorial on this pretty recently, but what we can do is just search for letter animations, which is right here. And then this has a bunch of stuff. It has CSS, it has JavaScript. There's a lot that's needed for this, but I'm just going to go ahead and copy it all. And then I'll go over to my page settings, and then right below my style tag, I'll paste in my script. And then there's an animation in here called fade up, and it's looking for any heading with the fade up class, which this heading already has that class of fade up. I'll go ahead and set the color of this to transparent, so we're not seeing the fill color, but we'll see the stroke color. Now on the published site, now that we added our JavaScript, what we should see is we're not only affecting how it looks now, we're also affecting how it works. So on page load, the letters slide up one after the other, then they slide out just like that. So now we have both pieces right there, just using a little bit of CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. So the next tip really is to stay organized. And this is probably the harder of the parts, but we're going to cover a couple different things. The first is, where should I be putting all this code? Now, anytime you're using JavaScript, the order is really important. The order matters. So in your page settings, you always want to put JavaScript in the closing body tag section. And what that means is it's just the last thing on the page. It's all the way at the bottom of the page. Say I were to take this JavaScript and I were to copy it all, and for some reason just paste it up here in the heading. This is all the way at the top of the page, the first thing that loads in the head. Then it's going to say, let's animate that heading. Let's fade in each letter one after the other. But the heading actually hasn't even loaded yet, so nothing's going to happen. So a lot of times when you're using JavaScript and you're wondering, why isn't this working? It's because you have it in the head. It's too far up the page. It needs to be in the closing body tag below down the page. So that's kind of where that needs to go. Now CSS, typically I like to put CSS as close to the top as possible. So I would put it in the head up here, so that way it kind of just works towards the top. Now if I wanted to reuse this heading on other pages, this is all this code that I just added is only affecting the home page. But say I wanted every instance of this fade up class across the whole site to have that outline, we would need to go to the page settings, and then in the custom code tab, right here in the head, that's where we would paste our CSS, and now it's affecting every page on the site. But so that is one option, and that's a pretty good option for using your CSS there. What I actually like to do is use my CSS directly on the page, and I'll show you why. So I usually have one div that's a symbol that holds all my important elements that I plan to use on every page. So it's going to hold my nav bar, any fixed buttons or elements on the corners of the screen, and then it also holds an HTML embed, which you can drag in right here. And that's where I open that up and paste my CSS. And the reason is, once you do that, you're seeing your CSS live on the page. You're not having to publish to check it out. Now, you don't want to put your JavaScript directly on the page because you had to publish anyway to see JavaScript working. So that's why you would paste that in the settings. But your CSS you can put directly on the page. And when I put it in a symbol, if I make any changes to it on this one page, it's going to change that code on every page that the code is on. So having it in a symbol is really, really helpful for your CSS. Now, one other thing that you would like to probably do to stay organized is you need to add comments to keep track of what this code is for. Otherwise, when you come back, you're probably going to forget. So like this JavaScript code right here is all for my letter animation. But let's say I also wanted to add some page transition code. If I wanted a custom page transition, so I just type page transitions, and then this is all my JavaScript. I don't have to copy the script tags again. I'll just go ahead and copy this code, come over here, and then I want to paste it inside my existing script tags, so you don't have to keep creating new script tags every time. But don't paste it in the middle of the code that's already there, because it could break something. You want to either paste it directly above the code that's already there or directly below, but it has to be inside those script tags. So I'll go ahead and paste this, but now I have a lot of code on the site. It's hard to keep track of what code's doing what is it for. So this is where adding comments is super helpful. And with comments, it's really only for you to see. So it's not gonna be on the actual page of your website, but whenever you look at your code, you'll be able to see these comments and know what that code was for. So to write a comment in JavaScript, we just use 2 forward slashes, hit a space, and then type whatever you want the comment to say. So this won't break the code, it's just there for you to see it. So in this case, I'll say that all this code is for my letter animation. And then I'll come down to the next block of code, which is right here. And I'll add another comment and say that all this code is for my page transition. And then, so now I know what all this code is for. I have those comments there. I can stay a bit more organized if I need to reference it later on. But also we can do that with our CSS. So if we come over to our CSS inside our nav, we can add comments. And to add a comment in CSS, you do the /, you do the asterisk, and then you type your comment name, like maybe this is my homepage CSS, and then you're going to need another asterisk and then another / to end it off. So open like this, close like this, everything in between is your comment. So now I know that anything in here is for my homepage, but then I can say my footer stuff, footer code, footer CSS, can be right here, and that's where I can paste all my footer code. So now I'm keeping it nicely grouped together. I have those comments so I know what it's for and where things go, and that just makes things really helpful. Now, if you're using JavaScript, I'll go back to the JavaScript we're using on the page. Like I said before, the order really does matter. So like this JavaScript right here is all the actual letter animations. That's what's making the letter animate. But to make that happen, we had to import something called a JavaScript library. And a JavaScript library is just a collection of even longer code. So if you were to try and put all that in this, you would actually exceed the Webflow code limit. So we actually just reference this code from something. So like if I were to take this one, for instance, this URL here for animate.js, this is my animation code that allows those letter animations. If I copy this URL and paste it in a new tab, I can see all this code is what's causing that letter animation to happen. So by using this script tag up here with the src and the URL, I'm importing all that code onto my actual site, if that makes sense. So these are called JavaScript libraries, and there's a ton of them. If you go to cdnjs.com, you can actually search for a library. So that anime library I was just using, anime.js, I can click on this, and then from there I can get the URL right here to the actual JavaScript library. And the minified version, this is just smaller, so it's not going to take as long to load. So I usually go for that if I can. Just copy that code, and then I can paste that inside my open and close script tags. So I need new script tags to import a library, and it needs to say src equals open and close parentheses, and then close out your first script tag, and then create your closing script tag. And then inside those open and close parentheses, that's where you paste the URL to your JavaScript library right there. So that's how you import JavaScript libraries. There's all different kinds. If you look at the CDN, there's particles, particle.js, I think right here where you can create these different interactive particles on your site, but there's all different kinds, and there's even documentation on how to use it. That's usually if you click on the any one of these. If you click on the GitHub page, this is where you'll find all the instructions from the person who wrote this library on how to use it in your site. But order does matter. So if I'm going back to this example, for instance, let's say I imported this JavaScript library, this anime.js, and then I decide to take all this second script, which is the actual like applying that animation to my heading, and maybe I decide to put that above the import. What's going to happen is this isn't going to work anymore. And the reason is, again, the JavaScript reads just like we do from top to bottom. So it's reading all this and it's saying, okay, apply this animation to this heading. The only problem is I don't have the animation imported yet, and the animation doesn't actually get imported till way down here. So the library has to come before the actual code that we're writing. The library goes up here at the top, and then we can start using that library below it. Now, you don't have to import these libraries on every page. If every page needs to have this anime.js and some sort of text animation, I can keep this, slide in animation that I only want to use on the home page in the home page code. But this anime.js code right here and all these libraries that I'm using, I can just copy them and I can remove them from here. And where is actually best to import your libraries is in the project setting under custom code, in the closing body tag, because remember, any JavaScript needs to go down here, and this is where I'll paste in that code. So this piece right here is going to load before the page specific code, so this will still be on top of any custom code we write in the page, which is what we want, but it's in the closing body section, and now I only have to import it once, and it imports for every page on my site. I don't have to worry about keeping that imported on each page individually. So if we go back to the designer, now that libraries imported, and then now we can use this JavaScript in whatever pages we want. We can copy this script and put it in whatever order we want. So that's a little bit about how to use these JavaScript libraries, how to keep things organized in the right order in your projects, and even with comments. The last tip really is this. It's to test and troubleshoot your code. So you can usually tell pretty quickly with CSS. If I were to open up this navbar, and because this is directly on the page, any CSS I write, I can tell pretty quickly if it's working or not working. With JavaScript, you can only tell that on the published site. So if I were to go ahead and publish this site and I were to test it out, one little thing can kind of mess up your whole JavaScript. If you have one quote out of place, if you have one character out of place, then not only is the page transition not working, but also the heading animation may not be working, and it may break a lot of the custom code we're using. So to keep things, if you run into an issue like that, what I like to do is just console log the errors, and I'll show you what that means. Let's go ahead and create a bug, for instance. Like I may add sort of an open or maybe a close bracket right after this line 10. Right here, so it should throw some sort of error because this little bracket isn't supposed to be there. So let's go ahead and publish it and see what happens. So now the text didn't load. There's some sort of error that's causing this animation not to work, and that can be the most frustrating part about using custom code is it's not working and you don't know how to get it to work. So in Chrome, if we right click and hit inspect, and then from here we can actually click on this tab called console. So all this right here is my HTML, all this is my CSS. You can make changes directly on here, like if I wanted to change the font size of my body, I could change it from here and see those changes live. I can even delete entire sections from here, but if we want to preview the JavaScript, we go to the console tab, and it's telling me an unexpected token right here. It's saying that character right there is not supposed to be in your code. So all I had to do is find out where is that character in my code that's causing the issue. And they make it super easy. If you click here, this index, it's going to tell me on this line 21, it's highlighted right here. I see that character right there. It's even underlined in red. I don't know if you can see that, but it has a red underline. So now all I had to do is go ahead and come over here to that line 10. I believe it was. And where'd it go? line 10, yes, and remove that character that we didn't need right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and create one more error just so you can see how this works. I'm gonna save this and I'll paste this code in the project settings, and this time we're gonna put it above the library. So this code is gonna run before the library ever gets imported. And let's see what kind of error it throws there for us. So we go ahead and publish, and then we can go back to the live site. And if we go back to the console tab, it says anime is not defined. So if I click on this to see where the issue is coming, you'll see it starts as soon as my custom code starts. It's the slide in anime timeline. It's saying anime is not defined because that library hasn't been imported. So I know if I ever see something like that where this variable I'm using isn't defined, I needed to make sure my libraries are running before that code to solve the issue. So that's the 3 tips for how to use code efficiently in your Webflow project. I really hope that this was actually helpful for you. Feel free to definitely subscribe so you never miss another tutorial again. And thank you so much to those of you who support this channel, because you really allow me to create more tutorials and give more content away to the community. So thank you so much. I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.